Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Galatians, the 5th chapter. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Hamashiach has made us free. And the stand fast meaning stand firm. Okay, fast is not here used in the sense of speed, but more so in the sense of like firmly. In the liberty wherewith Hamashiach has made us free. So Paul speaks about this freedom, right? This liberty in Yahweh Shai. And so what exactly he means by this, let's first look into the word liberty, right? Because what exactly are we free in Yahweh Shai to do that's different than being under the law? And it says here, liberty to do or to omit things having no relationship to salvation. And the word omit means to, if you omit something, you like leave it out, right? For example, you're telling somebody a story and they say that you omit the truth. You did not include it in whatever you were speaking, right? You omitted it, you left it out. So here in the liberty to do or omit things that have no relationship to salvation it's like rigorously prioritizing salvation. All right. And this is why, for example, you can say this liberty was expressed to the newly converted Israelites, especially those that were not of the circumcision at the Jerusalem Council. Because instead of, when you read in Acts the 15th chapter, there were some Pharisees that believed that said, no, they should be circumcised and keep the laws. But as per what Paul and Barnabas, the case they put forth, and what Peter said, and then what James's final verdict was, it all leaned towards, you know what? Let's not burden them with all these laws, but rather these are a handful of very important, ones that they should adhere to, right? They have to adhere to. So in that case, those new believers were at liberty to omit the things that didn't have a direct relationship to their salvation. And this is also the point Paul was trying to get across. Whether you're circumcised or not in the situation would not have a direct relationship to your salvation. And that's why he mentioned circumcision or not, that doesn't avail in Yahweh Shai. What avails is your faith and doing the works and the deeds of the Spirit. That is what avails to give you salvation. So going back to what I was saying about the council, they didn't have to keep all the laws because that is not what was going to give them salvation. So they were at liberty to omit certain things that didn't have a relationship to their salvation. So this is like an example of the liberty we have in Yahweh Shai, which is that we are not under the law, meaning we're not obligated to keep every single law in there. We keep it to the best of our ability. That is a part of the liberty. Because without that liberty, you wouldn't, if you kept it to the best of your ability, but the best of your ability wasn't good enough, i.e. you weren't keeping everything, then that's it. You would be under that curse. You would suffer the judgment for breaking the laws that you weren't able to keep according to the best of your ability. But through the grace and liberty in Yahweh Shai, we can still gain salvation, even though there are certain things you might omit that may be in the law, but they're not directly tied to your salvation. Like in our captivity now, we're in captivity now, and yet we're going to be delivered out of this captivity, right? Lord willing, we're of that elect. We're going to be delivered out of this captivity. But there's certain things in the law that we omit. We don't do. Because given the circumstance we're in, we can't. But that's a part of the liberty that we have in Yahweh Shai. Now, knowing this, the Apostle Paul also warns them about how to use that liberty. Okay. So it says here, verse 1 again, stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith Hamashiach hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. See? And if they were to go and follow those that were teaching them that salvation would come by way of circumcision or by way of perfecting the keeping of the laws of Moses, they would be entangling themselves under the yoke of bondage. And Paul was telling them not to do that. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Hamashiach shall profit you nothing. He's not saying here that those that are circumcised don't get to reap the benefits of Yahushai, or that if, let's say, one or two of them actually did get circumcised, then that's it. They can't have any part in Yahushai. But rather, as it is worded in the NLT, he says here, if you are counting on circumcision to make you right with God, then Hamashiach will be of no benefit to you. And so the reason he words it as that if ye be circumcised is because when he went there and taught them, he didn't teach them. He wasn't pushing that on them, right? He was pushing having faith in Yahushai. It was some that went after the Apostle Paul that likely also spoke evil about him, that went and pushed that on them. So if they went afterwards and then started to get circumcised, it's not in just the act alone, but it's in what that act signifies. Because that act signifies that, okay, you now believe that it is through that you'll be made right with God. Because if not, you wouldn't have stressed so much about it, as Paul and Barnabas didn't teach you those things when they came and preached to you the gospel of Yahushai. So if you are going in that route, then Yahushai is not going to profit you, because you're not putting your faith in him. You're not seeing belief in him as the way to salvation. So you're not going to profit. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to the whole, to do the whole law. Right? Because those that are relying on circumcision to be made right with the Lord, they would have to keep all the other parts of the law as well, because that's how they want to be justified. Well, it's an all or nothing deal when you go that route. Hamashiach is become of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. See, because what was the whole point of Yahushua giving us another way by believing in him? Believing in him shows that you are not of the mindset that, you're going to be justified by the law. If you can't, like, if you think you're going to be justified by the law, and believing in Yahushua says, no, you're not going to be justified by the law, then you have to go one way or another. So if you go in the direction of thinking, well, no, I'm going to be justified by the law, I'm going to be made righteous by keeping it all, then Yahushua is of no effect to you, because you chose the other path. And that means you're falling from his grace, because it won't apply to you. And what's going to happen is, when you find out the hard way that you can't actually keep all those laws perfectly, even if you kept 99 and there were 100 and you didn't keep 100, it's all or nothing. For we, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Because we know that the way to attain righteousness is through our faith in Yahushua. So you first start by having that faith and wait, all right, for that perfection, for that time when we're changed to be made perfect. But in that waiting period, you are growing, right, and learning and basically, following the ways of Yahushua. Because see, it's about believing and having faith, but there are things that accompany that, right? Fruits of the Spirit, works of the Spirit that you do to show your faith in Yahushua. And when you do the things that are contrary to that, you're showing your lack of faith in Yahushua. For in Yahushua Hamashiach, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision. See, whether you're circumcised or not, is not what's going to, it's not going to give you a leg up over somebody being circumcised. Doesn't give you an edge over somebody that's uncircumcised, and you're both believing in Yahushua. It really doesn't mean much when it comes to the faith of the Lord. Because guess what? You'll have people that will be delivered that may not be circumcised, right? And some that will be delivered that are circumcised. Yahushua is not going to say, oh, well, no, I'm sorry, buddy. You got to go back down, and I can't take you with me this time because of that. But faith which worketh by love. See, so that is what availeth. Your faith that is expressed through the works of love that you have, in terms of one towards another and towards Yahushua or Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushua. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? So he's like, yeah, you started off well. You believed the word. You showed zeal. You showed diligence. And now all of a sudden, who is it that has disturbed, that has stifled you? That you should not obey the truth, being the things that you were taught of Paul when he was there. This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. Meaning this persuasion to be justified by the law or through circumcision is not of the Most High. Meaning the Most High is not, the author of that, because the Lord is the one that called them, right? So that's what Paul's saying. This teaching that they're pushing on you is not from the Lord. What we taught you is from the Lord. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, right? So it's like a little leaven, right? It's like a little leaven, i.e. a small, in the ancient world, what they would do is if you had dough that was leavened, you would take a piece of that and mix it in with the unleavened dough, and then you would leave it and let it permeate throughout that dough, and it would cause that dough to be leavened. So that way, if you baked it, you would have your leavened bread. So a little bit of leaven is able to leaven the whole entire lump. And that's what Paul is saying here as well. Just a little bit of this leaven, which is those Jews that were pushing this, into the ears of the churches in Galatia, could be enough to subvert the whole church. I have confidence in you through the Lord that ye will be none otherwise minded. So he's saying, but I still have faith, that through the Lord, you're going to remain believing the things that we taught you, right? And not to be swayed otherwise. But he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. So whoever it is that's teaching you these things or trying to cause this conflict of mind concerning what you ought to believe, the Lord is going to judge that person, whoever they are. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Then is the offense of the cross ceased. So by this statement here, which I'll read in the NLT as well, and it'll make it a bit clearer, but by the statement here, you can deduce that it sounds like those that went there that were teaching or pushing the circumcision were likely saying something along the lines as well of, if Paul's teaching you that you don't need to worry about that and, you can just gain salvation through Yahushua, well, guess what? Even he himself, doesn't believe that, or he himself, pushes circumcision, or he himself, was persecuting the same very people not too long ago, and he was taught in these ways as well. See, because remember, when you go to the beginning of the book of Galatians, he mentions, right, that ye have heard how in my past conversation, right, in my past time, I was one that persecuted the church. I was zealous of the Pharisees and so on. So it's likely that whoever it is that was going there, they were using that as well, to try and, once again, subvert those churches and their trust in the teachings of Paul's teachings, right? And so Paul is saying here, well, if that's the case, right, and And if I'm truly preaching circumcision, right, or salvation through circumcision, then why am I being persecuted, right? If I'm teaching the same thing that these people are pushing, why am I being persecuted? Are we not teaching the same thing? And if that's the case, then there should be no offense. Nobody should be getting offended by the teaching of salvation through Yahweh Shai born on the cross, because then I'm not going to be teaching that, so that has ceased. Right? Nobody got to worry about that. But clearly, if I'm still being persecuted, then it's because I'm not pushing the same thing these people are pushing. Right? And the NLT says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if I were still preaching that you must be circumcised, as some say I do, why am I still being persecuted? If I were no longer preaching salvation through the cross of Yahweh Shai, no one would be offended. I would they were even cut off, which trouble you. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty." Right? We went into that word liberty in the first verse. Only you, and I mentioned this, right? So here he's saying you have the liberty, but don't use that. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, meaning to the sinful nature of the flesh, right? To lustful desires. But by love serve one another. And he mentions this because the flesh, remember, there were still certain things that these Israelite foreigners had to abstain from. Just absolute certain no-nos, right? And so he's saying here, yes, you may have liberty and you don't have to keep all the laws, but you still have to adhere to certain things. So don't use that liberty to say, oh, if all I got to do is have faith and I don't got to worry about keeping 1,000,001 laws, then then it shouldn't be a problem if I do this or if I do that, which are things of the flesh, right? Things, but as in like sinful things. So don't try to use your liberty as an excuse to deliberately sin. But instead, as it says, by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And why is that? Because if you read the laws, a good portion of them a majority of them, right, are about one, how you love and fear the Lord, but two, how you love and take care of your neighbor. A lot of the laws are about not, like even the 10 Commandments, it's about not doing ill to your neighbor or doing right to your neighbor. Don't commit adultery. That's going to harm your neighbor. That's somebody's wife. Don't steal. Don't murder. Don't covet. All of these things are about things that are harmful to your neighbor. All right. So if you love your neighbor as yourself, then it's not going to be a problem for you if you see your neighbor's ass going astray and then you go and return it back onto them, right? Which is just one example of many things. So it says here, but if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. And when you go into that word bite and devour, Paul doesn't mean that, you sitting there, right? You in the church, you all reading, and you look to the next brother's hand, he's holding his scriptures, and you just bite onto his forearm. That's not what it means. Here it says, metaphorically, to wound the soul, cut, lacerate, rend with reproaches. See? So the effect of physically biting someone and causing them pain through sinking your teeth into their flesh can be mirrored by using reproachful words or actions to wound someone's soul. And that's what Paul is warning against. Divisions and devouring one another. Because as he says, that ye be not consumed one of another, NLT. But if you are always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Beware of destroying one another, because that's not of Yahweh Shai. We are to love. The Lord said, love each other, even as I have loved you. Thus I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Because the spirit and the flesh want different things, as Paul is going into in the 17th verse. But if you adhere to the things of the Spirit and you are spiritually minded, you don't give room to entertain the thoughts of the flesh. The power the flesh has is to take over your mind. The more you think about it, the more likely you are to do it, right? Because it doesn't, when you start thinking about it, and if you think about something that you really want, your mind, because of how bad you want it, doesn't stop at just thinking about how bad you want it. Because you want it so bad, your mind starts to think about how can you actually get it. Okay? You want it, your brain starts to formulate how you can get it. And if you are thinking along the lines of the flesh, that how is unbridled, right? Like it's not bounded by the guardrails of righteousness. It's not going to say get it the right way. It's just going to say get it. That's how the flesh thinks. And so you see a chick, she looks really good. You really, really, really want her. The mind or the flesh starts to think about how can you get her, right? Maybe you seduce her or entice her or whatever the case is. The flesh, though, will not tell you, oh, she's married, so that's a no-no. You can't do that. No. Flesh is going to say, you get it how you get it. See? So when you are spiritually minded, you don't even give room to entertain the lusts of the flesh. Damn, she a fine shit. You see a ring on that? Nope. So you don't dwell on wanting something that is wicked. And if you don't think about it and want it, you won't think about how to get it. If you don't think about how to get it, you will not take action on it. So walk in the Spirit. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit. And we all know what it means to lust after something, right? Lust, the word lust in itself does not inherently mean sexual pleasure or women. It's just that usually it's associated with that. But to lust after something is like a very strong desire for something. Okay? So you can lust after things that are not women. But as it says here, the things that the flesh strongly desires are against the Spirit and the Spirit against the flesh. So the things the flesh really, really wants are contrary to the things the Spirit really wants. Okay? So it's just back and forth. And these are contrary one to another. What the Spirit really, really wants versus what the flesh really, really wants. When you're fasting, your spirit is desiring to grow, to sacrifice, to for whatever it is you're fasting for, spiritual growth. The flesh wants food, contrary to what it is that the Spirit wants. That's just one minor example. So as the Apostle Paul is saying, because this is the case, and these are contrary one to another, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. So with that, it doesn't mean that because of that you can't do anything to serve the Lord, but it makes it harder for you to do things, easily in a good conscience. It's always going to have to be a war, a battle. The Spirit is trying to do something, the flesh is trying to withhold you. The flesh thinks of doing something, you gotta put it down, you gotta put it in check. But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. So what does that mean? You're not under the law. Does that mean now you go and start sinning and committing adultery and doing wicked things? No. What it means is that you're not obligated to keep the law perfectly, because if you're led of the Spirit, that's not going to be your way of being justified. But you're still going to do the right things. But you're not going to pull your hair out because you're trying to do everything contained in the law perfectly, because that's how you think you're going to be delivered. In the NLT, it says, but when you are directed by the Spirit, you are not under obligation to the law of Moses, obligation to keep it all perfectly. You cannot do that. That point has to be stressed. It's literally, yeah. Verse 19, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. So these are, as the Apostle Paul is about to list, outcomes, right, of when you give into the flesh. These are the works, the results, the things that the flesh will lead you to do: adultery, fornication. Now we know what adultery is, right? Adultery, man has sexual intercourse with another man's wife. He is committing adultery. And on her part, a woman that's married, going and laying with another man is committing adultery. But you notice Paul mentions adultery and fornication. And fornication, because adultery is one thing, but fornication goes into a wider range, which includes adultery, but it also includes Moism, right? Homosexuality, lesbianism, bestiality, and even spiritual fornication, which is idolatry. All right, uncleanness, going into being, morally unclean, lasciviousness, which goes into lack of self-control, just giving into your desires, unbridled lust, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance. And that hatred, is going into like that enmity, right? That you would have one towards another, and you don't want to have that. You have to shut that down. But that takes the spirit. Variance, separation, emulation, okay, which also goes into that, being divided once against another, having separations and divisions among yourselves. Wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, and let's go into some of these words here. Let's look at that. Hatred. Yeah, cause of enmity, a reason for opposition. But if you are doing the things of the spirit, you wouldn't be looking for reasons for opposition. You'd be rather forgiving, and dismissing those reasons to keep the unity, to keep the peace amongst true brothers. Right? Contention, strife, wrangling. And this is what variance. Emulations. Let's go into that. It says here, excitement of mind, zeal. Definition 2, an envious and contentious rivalry, jealousy. These are all things of the flesh, and that's why you see these things prevalent in the world. And what do they lead to? Somebody's either dead, injured, a friendship is destroyed, or just some bad outcome, right? Wrath, we know what that means. Strife. It says here, apparently, in the New Testament, a courting distinction, a desire to put oneself forward, a partisan and factious spirit which does not disdain low arts. So factious is like, trying to like have a sect or a group, dividing to create your own sect that is against another, and not disdaining low arts, meaning you're willing to go, sink as low as possible to get your point across, which is not good. It's not good practice. Seditions, heresies. Let's take a look here. Similar, right? Dissension, division, and heresies. A body of men following their own tenets, sect, or party, right? Dissensions arising from diversity of opinions and aims. So these are all acts, works of the flesh, right? Envyings, murders, drunkenness. Drunkenness doesn't mean getting drunk is wicked, but it's, in excess, all right, uncontrolled. Revelings. And this is interesting because these are acts you see in the world all the time, right? And when it goes into revelings, it says here, a nocturnal and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows. That whole we outside spirit, this is describing that. All right, that's an example of this, of reveling. Who after supper, after supper, which is dinner, meaning in the nighttime, parade through the streets with torches and music in honor of Bacchus or some other deity. Now, how often do you see this? Especially when you go to the hood, you go to areas, the heights and so on. You go to areas where Jake is at. You'll see them out there. They got the fire hydrant water running, if it's the summertime, they got the loud music right on the street, on the corner, with the beach chairs out, standing by the cars, dancing, smoking hookah, or just being outside late doing this shit. Like, they don't got homes to be in. It says here, in honor of Bacchus or some other deity, and sing and play before houses of male and female friends. You see those little clips they have on Snapchat, on Instagram, and they're recording those little shorts, and they'll pan it around, and you just see them literally in the middle of the street, right outside somebody's house, playing loud music, twerking. Hence, used generally of feasts and drinking parties that are protracted till late at night and indulge in revelry. You want to see an example of it? Go on social media. You'll see exactly what that's talking about. But these are all works of the flesh, and this isn't anything new. They did this back then. And such like, right? These and similar things, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Because those are not the things of the Spirit. Those are not the things that are pleasing to the Lord. So they're not going to gain salvation. Now, you might say, but wait, aren't you going to have Israelites that do these things and get destroyed, but and still come back in the kingdom? Yes. But inheriting it in the sense that for the elect, they're going to be delivered in that lifetime, right? And they're going to enter into the kingdom through the gates. What that means is they're going to gain salvation, which is the deliverance from this kingdom, and directly blessed and crowned and given the first steps into the kingdom. That is the proper way to inherit it. Those that do these acts would be born into it. So it's almost like they'll be born into the inheritance of the elect. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long suffering, right? Also having patience, not being quick to anger, gentleness and goodness, faith, meekness, right? Humility, temperance, self-control. Against such, there is no law. So unlike the things above that Paul mentioned, which, there are laws to govern so that those you don't go overboard with those things. With these things, there is no law against this. Long suffering, gentleness, goodness, peace, faith, temperance, meekness. Because these are not evil works. And they that are Hamashiachs have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. So those that are in Yahushai, that have put on the mind of Yahushai, that believe in Yahushai, when you become that new creature, that old you, that flesh, that old man, and the lust and desires of that old man, the sinful nature, is in essence, right, metaphorically speaking, crucified with Yahushai, nailed to that cross. All right, it's dead, and you're a new person now. Your mind is renewed. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit, right? So if you live after the Spirit, right, to do the things of the Spirit, then follow the footsteps of the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vain glory, provoking one another, right? Vain glory, seeking, being conceited, right? Seeking the preeminence in everything, just to glorify yourself. Don't desire that. Don't seek to do that, right? Provoking, irritating one another, envying one another, because those are works of the flesh. And that brings us to the end of the book of Galatians, the 5th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Brachak Wadash. Until next time, Shalom.